Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chel Gimel, and Mir Hashem today we will be learning Daf Chav Tes Amid Beis and completing this very fascinating fascinating and complex Siman Reish Nun Zayin dealing with the halachos of HaTorah. We're going to pick up today on Daf Chav Tes Amid Aleph, 2 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch, near the end of the line, by the words V'chein Mutar. So that's in Siman Reish Nun Zayin, in the midst of Sif Ches. Our learning should be Oschus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesuna Batzaru Bashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayom Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakayim Yerachem Aleihem V'yetziam Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afela L'Oira U'mishibad L'Geula Hashta Ba'Gola U'vizman Kariv V'noimar Amen. So, continuing in Sif Ches over here, we need to give a brief recap of what we've learned already here in Sif Ches. So in Sif Ches, the Mechaber told me an interesting halacha. We have learned that there's a major difference when it comes to hatmana, insulating a hot pot for Shabbos. There's a major difference between insulating with a davar shemoisif hevel, using materials that generate and add heat to the food that's being insulated, or using a davar she'eino moisif hevel, something that does not generate its own heat and add heat to the food that's being insulated. What's the difference? Well, hatmana lechatchila b'Shabbos, to do hatmana on a pot on Shabbos that was not insulated when Shabbos began, that's always usher. It doesn't matter what kind of materials that you're using. The question is, if you're doing hatmana on Erev Shabbos, you have a nice hot pot of food on Erev Shabbos, you want to keep it hot for Shabbos, so now you want to do hatmana, you want to go ahead and insulate the pot. Are you allowed to do this or not? So what we've seen is, it depends. If you're using a davar she'ein moisif hevel, if you're using materials that don't generate and add heat, then you could do hatmana on Erev Shabbos. But if you're using materials that are moisif hevel, if you're using some kind of material like the pulp of squeezed olives or squeezed sesame, if you're using those kind of materials that we say generate their own heat and they're going to add heat to the food, then that hatmana is aser even on Erev Shabbos. So there's the great difference between a davar she'moisif hevel and a davar she'eino moisif hevel. Came along the Mechaber in the beginning of Sif Ches, and he told us an interesting thing. Begadim, clothing, or towels, or blankets, those are considered dvarim she'eino moisif hevel. These are things that don't generate heat, they don't add heat, they only insulate and allow the food to retain their own heat. So normally, you're allowed to do hatmana with these kind of materials on Erev Shabbos. Yet, said the Mechaber, there is a case where that would be aser. What's the case? You have a kira, or you have a tanur. It's got fire inside, in the bottom. It's got burning coals in the bottom. You want to do hatmana on top of this kira. Now, obviously, we have to be talking about a case where there's no issue of shehiyah. So the case where there's no issue of shehiyah, we could have 2 possible cases. Either the food is mavushal called tzarchai and it's mitztamik for aloi, so shehiyah is mutter, or maybe you're throwing a raw piece of meat into the pot, so shehiyah is mutter. So now, you have this burning kira, this burning tanner, you have this pot that you're allowed to do shehiyah on, you want to do shehiyah on top of this kira, but you want to go another step. Not only do you want to do shehiyah, you also want to insulate the pot to make sure that it's really going to stay nice and hot. You're looking at it and you're saying, well, I'm using begadim. I'm using materials that are not moisif hevel. L'chayre, this should be mutter on Erev Shabbos. Says the Mechaber, no, it's aser. Why? Because since there's a source of heat, there's a heat source, there are burning coals in the kira that you're doing this hatmana on top of, now the begadim become considered a davar hamoisif hevel, because the kira is generating heat that's going up to this insulated pot on top, and now if you do hatmana, it's considered that you're doing hatmana b'davar shemoisif hevel, and this would be aser on Erev Shabbos. That's the first halacha that Mechaber told me here in Sif Ches. But then the Mechaber came along and said there is a way that you could do this. The way that you could do it is if you do it in a way that's not derech hatmana. What's this case that's not derech hatmana? Well, derech hatmana always is that you wrap the pot so that the wrappings, the insulating materials, are in contact with the pot. Says the Mechaber, what if you do this? You have your kira with hot coals inside. You take the pot, you put it on top. Again, this is a case where shehiyah is mutter. Now you take a big, wide box that's bigger than the pot, and you invert it and you put it down over the pot. It's not touching the pot. There's airspace between the pot and the box. And now you throw begodim over the box. Says the Mechaber, in that case, that's not derech hatmana, and therefore that would be mutter. That's what we saw so far over here in the Mechaber. Now we go to 2 lines off the bottom, where the Mechaber gives us a similar case. Says the Mechaber like this, V'chein, similarly, mutter lahaniach hakedera betanurim shalanu. You're allowed to put a pot of hot food inside what the Mechaber calls tanurim shalanu. Now we have to remember back from Siman Reish Nun Gimel, when the Mechaber said that shehiyah inside a tanur is hotter than a kira. Shehiyah inside a tanur is asur, even if the tanur is garafikotum, doesn't matter, it's still asur. But the tanurim shelanu, the type of contemporary tanurim that they had in the days of the Mechaber and the Ramah, those did not have a din of a tanur. Those had a din of a kira. Therefore, says the Mechaber like this, in his days, you could take a kedera, you could take a pot of hot food, and you could put it inside a tanur, the type of tanur that they had in those days, even if the tanur was not garafikotum, al yedei sheyitain b'soicha chaticha chaya. So what you're doing over here is like this. You have your chicken soup pot, or you have your cholent pot, and you're going to put a raw piece of meat in it. Now you're putting a raw piece of meat in it, so now it's a davar chai. It's something, it's basar, that's completely raw. Now shehiyah becomes mutter, even in a tanur that's not garafikotum. Okay, so you've got a tanur, it's got burning coals inside, you've got a pot with raw meat in it. Shehiyah is mutter. Says the Mechaber, you could take that pot and you could put it inside the tanur. V'hu, with the caveat, v'hu shaloi tehei hakedera noigas b'gecholim. You have to remember that according to the Mechaber, the pot cannot be resting on the coals. Because if the pot is resting on the coals, right away you have a problem. That's hatmana b'miktsas, with a davar shemoisif hevel. And the Mechaber holds that hatmana b'miktsas in a davar shemoisif hevel is asur. So you can't put it in the coals. Then says the Mechaber, va'afal pisha mechasa piha tanur b'begodim. You could do this even if then you go ahead and you drape blankets, towels, coats, begodim over the entire tanur. This is all mutter. Since the insulating materials, the blankets, the towels, the coats, are not touching the kedera is inside the oven. Lav hatmanahi, this is not considered hatmana, v'shari, and this would be mutter. So again, what's the halacha that the Mechaber just told me? The Mechaber is telling me like this. I have a pot. It's a hot pot of food, but it's got raw meat in it. I want to put it inside my tanur that has burning coals in it, so it's a tanur that's not garafikotum. I want to put it in there before Shabbos starts. Then, after I put it in there, I want to take materials and I want to throw the materials over the whole tanur to keep the heat of the tanur inside the tanur, thereby keeping the food hot. Am I allowed to do this? Well, there's 2 halachas that we have to tackle. The first halacha is the isser of shehiyah. What you're doing is shehiyah. You're taking a hot pot of food, and you're putting it inside a tanur with burning coals on Erev Shabbos going into Shabbos. Are you allowed to do this? Says the Mechaber, yes, you are allowed to do it. Why? Because there's raw basar inside. Shehiyah on basar chai is mutter, because there's no shashem yechata b'gecholim. It's raw meat. It's not going to be ready for the Friday night Suda, even if you stoke the coals. So al shehiyah, this is mutter. Okay, so we've checked off box number 1, al shehiyah, it's mutter. Now I want to take blankets and I want to throw it over the whole tanur. Okay, that's some kind of hatmana. I'm doing insulation. Is there a problem of hatmana over here? Says the Mechaber, no. There's no problem of hatmana. Why? Because the pot is inside the kedera. There's plenty of space between the kedera and the walls of the oven. So being inside the tanur is not hatmana, and putting blankets over the entire tanur. You're not doing hatmana on the pot. So this is mutter al shehiyah. It's mutter al hatmana. There's no reason not to do this. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah ois cotton mem dalet. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'chein mutter pirush ad hashta ma'iril inyan kira. Until this point, we were talking about a typical kira. V'ata, and now, Baal Faresh, the Mechaber wants to come to explain, the gam betanur, that also with the types of tanurim that they had in the days of the Shulchan Aruch, which had the din of a kira, mutter litain kedera excuse me, you would be allowed to put a pot on Erev Shabbos, before Shabbos starts, into the tanur, va'af she'ena garif v'katum. Even if the tanur is not garif or katum, it's got mamish burning coals inside. Why is this okay? Why isn't it a problem of shehiyah? Because since you're putting in a raw piece of meat, there is no chash of shemi yechata b'gechalim, and therefore al shehiyah, this is 100% mutter. For huadin, the same thing is true in himavushel. It's called tzarcha. It doesn't have to be that there's a piece of raw meat in the pot. It could be that it's a food that's mavushel called tzarcha umitztamik varaloi. So again, there's no shashem yechata b'gechalim. You're not going to be mechata b'gechalim in order to ruin your food. So again, shehiyah would be mutter. The ilavachi, because if the food is not either mavushel called tzarcha umitztamik varaloi or raw, Asr mishum shehiyah, then there would be an Isser shehiyah, the Chanal Bereish on Gimel Sefalef. Da'av shak dera kula nesuna b'saychat tanur, even though you're taking this pot and you're putting it completely inside the tanur. So the pot is now completely immersed inside the tanur, and it's completely surrounded on top, on bottom, on all four sides by the tanur. Is that hatmana? Says the Mechaber, no, this is not hatmana. Da'av she'akdei kula nesuna b'saychat tanur umechase es pi hatanur gam kein bebegadim, and now you're also going to throw blankets and towels and coats over the whole tanur. Ubevadai moisev hevel al yidei chayim hatanur, and definitely this is a case of moisev hevel. There's burning coals inside the tanur. Afilu hachi ein shem hatmana al zeh. But this is not called hatmana. V'shari, and its mutter came at she'ena begadim noigin bakadera. Since there's airspace, there's plenty of space between the side walls of the pot and the walls of the tanur, and the begadim are even on the outside. Nothing is insulating the pot. Nothing is surrounding the pot. It's not called hatmana. So this is mutter because there's no shehiyah issue, nor is there a hatmana issue. Excuse me. Then the Mechaber gave us a caveat. The Mechaber said, "V'hu shaloi tehei." But the Mechaber says, remember, if you're taking a kedera and you're putting it inside a tanur where there are burning coals, you have to make sure that the kedera, the pot, is not sitting on the coals. Why, says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut memhei, de'im hayu shuleha noigin begechalim, because if the bottom of the pot was actually touching the coals, then svir leil ha-mechaber, then you have the shitas ha-mechaber, the mechaber who holds, the machma ze gufa mikri matmin bedavar ha-moisev hevel v'aser. If the kedera is sitting inside the tanur and the bottom of the kedera is resting in the coals, then you already have a problem of hatmana with a davar ha-moisev hevel. Forget the kedera, forget the tanur. Forget the begadim that you could put on top of the tanur. The fact that the pot is resting on the coals means, according to the Mechaber, that you're being matmin the pot with the hot coals. Because the Shita Mechaber is that hatmana b'miktsas is considered hatmana. And burning coals are definitely a davar shemoisef hevel. So according to the Mechaber, that would be also right away. But he's reminding us, the Mishnah Berurah, that in Reish Nun Gimel we learned that the Ramah argues on that Mechaber. The Ramah holds that hatmana b'miktsas like that is not called hatmana, so the pot could be resting on the coals. Now remember, if the pot is resting on the coals, you have a potential issue when you want to remove the pot to use the food. Because if the coals are still burning, you're going to have a kiboy problem, extinguishing the coals, a havara problem, because when you pick up the pot, air is going to get to the coals underneath and they're going to fire up. So you won't be allowed to do this until the coals are dead. But we learned about this already in Siman, Reish, Nun, Gimel. Okay. So this is the halacha that the Mechaber told us. Now, the Ramah, and I'm very happy, I have to say, that I did not follow the Dirshu schedule. The Dirshu schedule would have picked up today with this Ramah. But this Ramah is directly building on the halacha that we just learned in the Mechaber. So the Mechaber just told me, and he was talking to his contemporaries. He said, we have the tanurim shalanu, in the words of the Mechaber, the types of the ovens that they had in those days. The Mechaber said, you want to take your hot chicken soup, your hot shalom, you want to put it inside the tanur, that's not gorafikotum, there are burning coals inside. He says, you could put it in, as long as, on Erev Shabbos, you could put it in, as long as the pot's not sitting on the coals. So there's a tripod, there's a platform that the pot sits on, it's elevated somehow. You could put it in there, and then you could cover the whole tanur with begadim. In order to do this, either there has to be raw food in the pot, so there's no shia problem, or there has to be that the food in the pot is mavushal called tzarchayim stomach varaloi, so there's no shia problem, and there's no hatmana problem because this is not derech hatmana. There's nothing in contact with the pot itself. There's airspace around the pot. Building on that, says the Ramah, Haggah, top line Chavtes Amud Beis. V'hatamana she'oisin b'medinois elu. The Ramah says the type of hatamana do in his regions, b'medinois elu, in these countries, shematiminim betanur, where they would take a pot and they would put it inside the tanur with burning coals inside the pot, just the way that the Mechaber just described. So they take the pot and they put it inside the tanur with the burning coals. And then, v'tochin pi hatanur betit. Then they close the door of the tanur and they seal it with clay. Shari l'kulei alma. This is mutter according to everybody. Now, I'm going to give you a heads up on what the Mishnah Berurah is going to say about this Ramah. The Mishnah Berurah is going to say that what the Ramah is coming to tell you over here is, we just learned this halacha in the Mechaber. And the case of the Mechaber was mutter because we checked off both boxes. We saw that there's no shehiyah problem and there's no hatmana problem. So the case as described by the Mechaber is 100% mutter. Now the Ramah is saying that the minig in his medinos was a little bit different. What they did was, they took a pot of food that did not have raw meat in it. Or they took a pot of food that was not mevushal kartzarchai and mitztamik varaloi. And they put it inside the oven together with the burning coals. And then they closed the door and they sealed it with tit. Says the Ramah, that's also mutter. Why is it mutter? Because again, we're going to check off both boxes. Why? Why isn't there a shehiyah problem? You're doing shehiyah on a pot of food that's not mavushal kol tzarchai mitztamik varaloi, it's not raw, and the tanur is not garafikotum. There are burning coals inside the tanur. Why is this mutter? The reason is because you shut the door and you sealed it with clay. Once you shut the door and you seal it with clay, we already learned earlier, brought down in the Ramah, there's no longer a gzero shemi yechata b'gecholim. There's no chash shemi yechata b'gecholim. If you closed the door of the oven and you sealed it with clay, no one's going to go bust the door open in order to do chitui. So what the Ramah is saying is, tweak the case of the Mechaber a little bit. In the Mechaber's case, the way he got rid of the shehiyah problem was by saying that we're dealing with food that's mavushal called tzarchai mitztamik varaloi, or it's raw. Says the Ramah, I'll give you a case where the food doesn't have to be raw. It doesn't have to be mavushal called tzarchai mitztamik varaloi, even according to the Mechaber. The Mechaber is more makber than the Ramah. The Ramah only needs Michael ben Drusai. But it doesn't even have to be that. Why? Because I'm going to take care of the shehiyah problem by closing the oven door and sealing it with clay. This fact that the oven door is closed and sealed with clay is not negeah to the isser of hatmana. There's no isser of hatmana in this case for the same reason that there was no isser of hatmana in the Mechaber's case, because it's not derech hatmana. There's airspace around the pot. The pot is inside the tanur, removed from the walls of the tanur. So this is not derech hatmana. The fact that you're immersing the pot inside the tanur, that's not called hatmana, just like in the Mechaber's case. The only difference between the Ramah and the Mechaber is how we're obviating the isser of shehiyah. That's the difference over here. Says, and he brings this down from the Dirshu and the Trumas Hadeshim. U'kamoishin ispar le'el siman reish nun dalid v'yispar le'kamon soif siman reish nun tes. Okay, now let's see the Mishnah Berurah over here that spells this out. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Memvav. In the case of the Ramah says, V'tachin piatan or betit. They would close the door of the oven and seal it with clay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hine, li'inyan hatmana, when it comes to the shaila of hatmana, ein tsar klal tiach betit gam laharamah. The fact that we're closing the oven door and sealing it with clay is not negaya to the shaila of hatmana at all, and that's not why the Ramah mentions it. Ela de Baloimar, what the Ramah is coming to say is, de betiach, that when you seal the door of the oven with clay, shari b'chal inyan, this becomes mutter in every way, afilu ein noisin b'chaticha chaya shal basar, even if you did not put in a raw piece of meat in the pot, v'gami adaya b'tchilas bishul, and the food is not cooked. It's not mavuzikol tzarchim stomach v'raloi, it's not even Kamichael ben Drusali, according to the Ramah. In such a situation, you have a pot of food that's not fully cooked. You have a pot of food that doesn't contain raw food. Shehiyah is aser in a tanner that's not gar fekatim. But over here, since it's tuach betit, since the door of the tanner is sealed with clay, there's no longer chashash shem yechatim b'gechalim. It would have been also mishum chashash chitoi, says the Mishnah Berurah. But ubetiach, but if the door is sealed with clay, shari, it becomes mutter. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, v'da, and you should know. The Mavur La'el, the Mishnah Berurah is reminding us of something that we learned earlier in Siman Reishton Daled Sivches. The dafka bebasar kishu chai ein by chashash chitoi. And this is a mistake, by the way, that I've seen many people make halacha lemaisa. A lot of people that did not learn these halachas that we're learning inside now, they only know what they've been exposed to over the years. They think that there's a general rule that there's never a problem of shehiyah as long as the pot contains something raw. So they'll grab anything and throw it into the pot and say, okay, now there's something raw in the pot. There's no isser of shehiyah. The Mishnah Berurah is reminding us that that's not true. Remember, the dafka b'basar kishu chai ein by chashash chitui. It's only by raw meat that we say that since the pot now contains raw meat, there's no longer a chashash shem yechata b'gechalim. Meat takes a long time to cook. So if you put raw meat in right before Shabbos, we're not afraid you're going to be mechata b'gechalim, because being mechata b'gechalim is not going to help you. The meat's not going to be ready on time for the night suda anyway. Avo pashtida, but if you're talking about some kind of a knish, I mean a kitnias, right? The pashtida, it has similarities to the word pastry. That's a dough it's a dough filled with some kind of food inside. Avo pashtida, I mean a kitnias or legumes, I mean a butzeik, or baked goods, like dough-based goods. Those cook very quickly. And even if you would put them in when they're raw, close to Shavush, then there would be a chash, because you're going to be tempted to accelerate the cooking process to have these quick cooking foods available for the Friday night Suda. So then, in order to take away the Isser of Shehiyah, you would have to close the door and seal it with clay, because the fact that you have raw food is not going to take away the Chash, Shemi Yechata B'Gechalim, because you're dealing with foods that could cook quickly. In locales where they don't have this custom, they don't cook this way, they don't seal the doors of their ovens with clay, also, you would not be allowed to put these types of foods inside the tanner close to Shabbos, unless you put in raw food, a piece of raw meat. Excuse me. Unless you have enough time before Shabbos starts that the food will become cooked to the degree of Michael Ben Drusai, or you do kitum, you bank the coals. But if you have hot coals inside the tanner, if you don't seal the door with clay, you got to watch out for shehiyah. And therefore, if you have foods that could cook in time for the Friday night Suda, then even if they're raw right before Shabbos, you still have an Isser Shehiyah. Ois Cotton Mem Zayin. Okay, so the Ramah told us that in his case, and again, what was his case? His case was you have a tanur that has burning coals inside. You're taking a pot of food. It doesn't even have to be muvushal kol tzarchai. It doesn't have to be Michael ben Drusai. It doesn't have to be raw. You could put it inside the tanur with burning coals inside the tanur. What happened to the Isser of Shehiyah? Oh, we're taking care of the Isser of Shehiyah by closing the door and sealing it with clay. How about the Isser of Hatmana? No, this is not Hatmana. Why? Because it's not Derech Hatmana. Why isn't it Derech Hatmana? Because even though the pot is totally immersed within the space of the oven, so it's surrounded by the oven, and there are hot coals in there, so it's Moisiv Hevel, that's not called Atmana. Why isn't it called Atmana? Because the insulating materials, which in this case are the walls of the oven and the coals, those are not in contact with the pot. They're not surrounding the pot. There's airspace around them. And therefore, this is not Derech Atmana, so there's no Atmana issue. Oiskat Mem Zayin, says the Mishnah Berurah, Shari L'chul Yama, V'afal Pikein. Even so, says the Mishnah Berurah, Yesh Oimrim, there are those that say, Titzarich Lizar Shelo Yatmin HaKedera B'soich HaTanur, Shelo Yatmin HaKedera B'Tanur, you have to make sure not to insulate the pot within the tanur, B'soich HaGecholim, by surrounding it with coals, Mikol Tzad. Okay. The Kari Atmana, B'Dover HaMoisiv Hevel, Machmas HaGecholim Gufa. Now, first I'm going to tell you what the Mishnah Berurah just said. And the Mishnah Berurah is bringing this down from a Marshal. First, I'll tell you what the Mishnah Berurah said. Then we have to explain what exactly the Chiddush of the Mishnah Berurah is. What the Mishnah Berurah is saying is like this. The Mechaber and the Ramah both just discussed a case where you're taking a pot, you're putting it inside a tanur, and the tanur has burning coals in it. The chidushim of the Mechaber and the Ramah, there was a chiddush b'negeya to the halachas of Hatmana. There was also a chiddush b'negeya to the halachas of Shehiyah. B'negeya to the halachas of Hatmana, the chiddush of the Mechaber and the chiddush of the Ramah, they're both the same, is that even though the pot is completely within the space of the tanur and it's completely surrounded on all sides by the walls and the floor and the top of the tanur, that's not called Hatmana. Why isn't it called Hatmana? Because Hatmana is only when you wrap the pot so that the insulating materials are in contact with the pot. The pot inside the tanur, the walls of the tanur, the top of the tanur, are not in contact with the walls of the pot. The floor is, but nothing else is. And according to the Mechaber, the floor isn't either. According to the Mechaber, remember, the pot had to be elevated above the coals. Otherwise, that would be a Hatmana b'miktsas, and a taka would be aser. So the chiddush over here is that since the pot is immersed, even though the pot is immersed within the space of the oven, it's not called Hatmana because there's space around the pot within the tanur. Now says the Mishnah Berurah like this, from the Marshal. What if you do like this? What if you take the pot, you put it inside the oven, and you cover the kedera on all sides with burning hot coals? Now you have hot coals completely surrounding the pot, in contact with the pot. Now that sounds like Hatmana B'Dover Shemoisiv Hevel 101. You have coals, that's Mamash Remetz. This is the worst of the worst. You have burning coals, and they're completely surrounding the pot on all four sides and on top and bottom, in contact with the pot. That's Mamish Hatmana with a Dover HaMoisiv Hevel. Why would anybody think that would be mutter? I'll tell you why. Because this pot that is mutman inside the gecholim is inside a tanur, and the door of the tanur is closed and it's sealed with clay. So what? Oh, I'll tell you so what. Well, let's remember that the underpinnings of the Isser of Shehiyah and the underpinnings of the Isser Hatmana are virtually identical. What are the underpinnings of the Isser of Shehiyah? The underpinnings of the Isser of Shehiyah are, we're afraid that if we let you do Shehiyah, we let you leave a pot on top of a kira that has burning coals inside, we're afraid that when Shabbos comes, you might stoke the coals in order to heat up the food, or in order to accelerate the cooking process. So the whole Isser of Shehiyah is built on the fear of Shemi Yechata B'Gechalim. You take away the fear of Shemi Yechata B'Gechalim, you take away the Isser of Shehiyah. That's why the Ramah said, if you take a pot that's not Mavushal Kol Tzarchai, and it's not raw, you could put it inside an oven with burning coals, and then close the door and seal it with clay. Because if you close the door and seal it with clay, you took away the fear of Shemi Yechata B'Gechalim. Once you take away the fear of Shemi Yechata B'Gechalim, you take away the Isser of Shehiyah. Now, let me ask you a question. What are the underpinnings of the Isser of Hatmana? The underpinnings of the Isser of Hatmana are, if we're going to allow you to do Hatmana using a Davar HaMosef Hevel, if we're going to allow you to take a pot on Erev Shabbos and insulate it with burning remets, insulate it with ash, with burning embers inside to keep it hot, then we're afraid that after Shabbos starts, you might be Mechata B'Gechalim. You might stir up those embers to make good and sure that the pot is hot. So therefore, the Chazal asered Hatmana. They asered Hatmana with any time with a Davar HaMosef Hevel, even on Erev Shabbos. You're not allowed to do Hatmana with a Davar HaMosef Hevel, even on Erev Shabbos. So again, the underpinnings of the Isser Hatmana are also Shema Yechata B'Gechalim. Okay, so now let me ask you something. If we take a pot and we surround it on all four sides and on top and bottom, in contact with the pot, with burning coals, but then we take it and we put it inside a tanner and we close the door and seal it with clay, why is there a Chashash Shema Yechata B'Gechalim? The same way closing the door and sealing it with clay takes away the Chashash Shema Yechata B'Gechalim and makes Shehiyah mutter, it should also take away the Chashash of Shema Yechata B'Gechalim and make Hatmana mutter. That's where this Mishnah Berurah is coming from. And the Marshal says no. You can't make that cheshbon. So now let's see it again. Says the Mishnah Berurah like this. Va'af al pikein, even though the Ramah said that you could take a pot, you could put it inside a tanner with burning coals, it has no raw food, it's not mavushal kol tzarchai, but you're going to take away the Isser Shehiyah by closing the door and sealing it with clay, and there's no Isser Hatmana because there's space around the pot. Having said that, Yesh Oimrim, there are those that say, the Marshal, that Tzarik Lizar, that when you do this you have to take care, Shelo Yatmin HaKteira Batana B'Soich HaGechalim Mikol Tzad. Don't go ahead and cover the pot with burning coals. The Kari Atmana B'Davar HaMosef Hevel Machbes HaGechalim Gufa. Because that's called doing Atmana with a Davar HaMosef Hevel, and it's usher, even though you're going to close the door and seal it with tit, and therefore you would think there's no Chash Shema Yechata B'Gechalim. Now, if you take a look at the Shar Tzion, the Chavetz Chaim explains the rationale of this Marshal. And he says this like this. He says, we can see that Chazal asered Hatmana even when there really isn't a Chash of Shema Yechata B'Gechalim. Why? Because we know that Chazal asered Hatmana with any Davar HaMosef Hevel. One type of Davar HaMosef Hevel is Gefes, the pulp of squeezed out olives. Says the Chavetz Chaim, there's no Chash Shema Yechata B'Gechalim by Gefes. Gefes never has burning embers in it. So there's no Chash of Shema Yechata B'Gechalim. So why did Chazal aser Hatmana in Gefes? The answer is, they asered Hatmana with Gefes because they always asered Hatmana with a Davar HaMosef Hevel, even if there is no Chash of Shema Yechata B'Gechalim. Why? Because if we allow you to do Hatmana with a Davar HaMosef Hevel, you might come to do Hatmana with Remets, and by Remets there is a Chash Shema Yechata B'Gechalim. Therefore, says the Marshal, you're right. If you do Hatmana in burning hot coals, but then you put it inside an oven, close the door and seal it, there really is no Chash Shema Yechata B'Gechalim. No one's going to boast open the door and go be Mechata B'Gechalim, but it doesn't matter. You're still doing Hatmana with a Davar HaMosef Hevel. You are matmin that pot inside the tanner. You covered it completely, top, bottom, and all four sides with burning coals. So you did Hatmana with a Davar HaMosef Hevel. Hatmana with a Davar HaMosef Hevel is always aser, even in cases where there's no Chash Shema Yechata B'Gecholim. And Rabbi say this is just, by the way, another case of a line and a half that we could have just read, translated, it would have made perfect sense, and gone on. But you would have absolutely no idea where this marshal is coming from. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter. Having seen this marshal, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'yesh makilin gam bazeh. However, there are those who differ with this marshal. The El Yerabba, Chedusha Rabbi Akiva Eiger, the Graz, the Arzarua. V'yesh makilin gam bazeh. They make a leave it in this case. Ta'tuach petit, v'lo yosi l'chatuyeh. V'chein mashma ba'arzarua. But the Mishnah Berurah says, V'toiv l'hachmer l'chatchila. V'gam mitam acher. There's another reason that you should be machmer not to do this. Not to cover the pot with a mountain of burning coals. Maybe you'll still have some burning embers tomorrow, Shabbos by day, when you want to take out the cholent. And now you're not going to be able to take out the pot because you're going to come up against kivoy and havara. If you have burning coals surrounding the pot, how are you going to take the pot out? You're either going to extinguish coals, you're going to uncover some other coals and expose them to air and fire them up. So the Mishnah Berurah says there are very good reasons to be machmer. In places where the minhag was not to seal the door with clay, then you certainly would not be allowed to do this hatmana inside the coals, inside the oven. Okay. Now we come to a very, very beautiful Ramah that closes out this Siman Reish Nun Zayin. Says the Ramah, mitzvah lahatmin l'Shabbos kedei sheyochal chamin b'Shabbos. There is a particular mitzvah to do hatmana, shehiyah, to do something that will allow you to have hot food for the Shabbos Suda. V'kizehu mikvoid v'oinik Shabbos. Because that is proper kavod and oinik Shabbos, to have hot food by the Shabbos Suda. Cold food is not the same as hot food. So it's a din of kavod Shabbos and oinik Shabbos to have hot food. And anybody who's not willing to put his faith in the words of Chazal, who say that it's a mutter to have hot food on Shabbos, it's mutter to have a fire burning on Shabbos, if you do it the proper way, if you do it within the guidelines and constricts of halacha. Somebody who doesn't believe that, and he says you're not allowed to eat hot food on Shabbos because you're not allowed to have fires going on Shabbos, like the tztukim, we have to be choishish chas v'chalila that this person is an apikoris, that he's a min, that he's a tztuki, a baitusi, and he's going keneged Torah Shabbat Peh, he's denying the validity of Torah Shabbat Peh, chas v'chalila. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Mem Ches. Mitzvah lahatmin l'Shabbos. There is a distinct mitzvah to do hatmana, and he doesn't mean only hatmana, to do hatmana or shehiyah, but to do something within the constricts of halacha to make sure that you have hot food. Alva misha mazik loy hachamin, but somebody whose health is going to be harmed by eating hot food, mutter lechol tzainin. It's not a chiyuv that you must eat hot food. If somebody can't eat hot food because it's going to harm him, then he could be yotzeh his covered in Einik Shabbos and his Suda Shabbos with cold food. Now I want to be medayik in this Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says avamisha mazik loy hachamin. If the chamin is going to harm him, how about somebody who's not going to harm him? He just says, I don't particularly like hot food. I'd rather have cold food. No. The mashmois of the Chavetz Chaim is that no, there's a distinct mitzvah to eat hot food, even if you might like cold food better. Why would that be? I think the answer is exactly the point is to show this, to show that it's a mutter to have hot food, to show that you're maimin b'divrei Chazal, to show that you're maimin b'Torah Shabbat Peh, you have hot food on Shabbos. So only have a few spoons of hot soup. Only have a couple of spoons of cholent. I do that sometimes. I eat very little Friday night for health reasons. I eat very, very little on Friday night. But sometimes I'll just have 2 spoons of hot soup to have chamin. So too Shabbos by day. Sometimes it's very hard for me to have cholent or something. I'll just have a spoon just to have chamin. Even though it's brought down, you don't really have to have chamin by both sudas. It's an Indian to have chamin by the day suda most specifically because that's the more chashuv suda. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut mem test. V'chol mi. Ubiyameinu nowadays, says the Chavetz Chaim, ba'avoy noiseinu harabim. Motzi kilkel gadol. A kilkel gadol has come out. Al yidei elu sheparshan atzman b'shut nefesh b'mitzvah achilas chamen b'Shabbos. Chavetz Chaim says in his days there were those who blatantly went against this inyan of eating chamen. They don't want to have chamen. Cholent, that's an old minhag. They want to have sushi. They want to have, sourdough with dips. They want to have the nice contemporary foods. They don't want to be bothered with the traditional foods. Chamen, that's an alta minhag. They don't want to have chamen. And the Mishnah Berurah says that it's a terrible thing. It's a kilkel gadol, he calls it. And he gives us another reason why it's a kilkel gadol. Shebon lebasayif al yidei zeh lidei iser. They end up coming to Isurim. Because they're not concerned to have chamen on Shabbos, they don't make preparations for chamen. So they don't do any kind of shehiyah, they don't do any kind of hatmana, they don't set up a blech. No, I'm going to eat cold food. And then you know what happens? Then they go ask a guy to go make hot food for them. So for example, they made no preparations for chamen. Then Shabbos morning they want a coffee. Oh, so they go outside, they find an Eini Yehudi, and they ask an Eini Yehudi, do me a favor, boil up water. Amir lakum. The kama pamim yavayu al yidei zegam lidei yisiri daraisa. Not only that, says the Chavetz Chaim, forget Amir lakum, is the Drabanan. Sometimes they come to daraisis, shal shloisha avis malachos. Sometimes they're actually over 3 different avis malachos daraisa, which would mean that you would be chayiv 3 carbon chatos if you did it b'shoigig. What are the 3? V'hein bishul, the Isser Daraisa of Bishul, the Malach of Bishul, Havara, and Kibui. How do you have all 3? Shemamidin es akli im aliyati alamulyar ol b'shenenu samavar b'shaja gachal bayaros. They take a keli with hot water and they put it on top of some kind of a samovar, some kind of a cooking utensil that has burning coals inside it. Hare Bishul, the mamish doing Bishul, the boiling up water at Shabbos. When they take the keli off the hot coals, they expose the hot coals to air, they're over havara. When they put it back on, they extinguish the coals, they're over on kibui. When you put it on, it dims the coals. And when you take them off, it fires up. Somebody who would do this b'mezid is Mechal Shabbos b'mezid. Who pasal edus, he's pasal edus, they call him up to a chuppah. Mechibin mit edus, he's pasal edus. Vil shvua, he's pasal to make a shvua min HaTorah. This is b'daraisa. Ubachris is nafshe me eretz hachayim. And chas v'chalila, this person is chayv koris. Ki hi averish hachayavin aleh koris is skila. Because this is mamish chil Shabbos daraisa. Chil Shabbos daraisa, if you do it b'mezid u'bahasra, a person would be chayv skila. If he does it b'mezid without hasra, he'd be chayv koris. The chol bal nefesh lo yosem minig Yisrael lahat min chamen al Shabbos. Any bal nefesh, anybody, what's a bal nefesh? A bal nefesh is somebody who realizes and acknowledges the fact that he's not only a gashmiistic being, he has a nefesh, he has a neshama, so he's a bal nefesh. Somebody who's a bal nefesh, who cares about his neshama, should not chas chalila turn away from the minig Yisrael lahat min chamen al Shabbos to make sure that he has chamen on Shabbos. Or l'kayim is the seinik Shabbos keshenah guavi seinu me'olam v'shomer mitzvah lo yedei davar ra. It's a bit of a mystery to me why the Mishnah Berurah brings down this pasuk from Kehelis, shomer mitzvah lo yedei davar ra. Is it a bracha that he's giving, that you're being shomer mitzvah lo yedei davar ra? Or is he telling, it could be, I have a zamach shav in my mind. I'm sittering a little bit to say it because they didn't work it out 100%. But I have a shtickle machshava in my mind that maybe another thing that the Chavetz Chaim is alluding to is that you have somebody who doesn't want to do atamana or shehiyah because he wasn't a orangutan in the sugya of shehiyah, chazara, hatamana. He didn't learn all of these sugyas be'i and rav, and he's afraid. So look, if your taka don't know the halacha, so the taka you have to be careful in Chirami. But if you do know the halacha, have faith. Have faith in your knowledge of the halacha. Have faith in your knowledge of the minhagim, what you saw in your parents' homes, in your rabbeim's homes. Have faith in what you're allowed to do. Have faith in divrei chazal and do it. And shomer mitzvah lo yedei davar ra. There's a very poetic and beautiful Bal Hamar in Masechta Shabbos in Parakira. Kol mi she'eino oichel chamin, somebody who doesn't eat chamin on Shabbos. V'tzarich lahazmin, you have to prepare chamin. Levashel ulahatmin, to cook and to do hatmana. Ula'aneg es haShabbos ulahashmin, and to fulfill oinig Shabbos ulahashmin. I think it comes from a lashon of shamein, fat. In other words, to have an enjoyable Shabbos Suda. Hu hamaymin, such a person is considered a maimin. So you see the poetic lashonis over here. Kol mi she'eino oichel chamin, v'tzarich lahazmin, levasha lahatmin, ula'anig es haShabbos ulahashmin, hu hamaymin, v'zoicha l'keitz hayomin. And such a person will be zoicha to bias Mashiach tzidkenu l'keitz hayomin, ayin sham oid. And we're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua Sefuas Panos and Shidduchim to all those in need, and we should tackle all bizoicha to Leketz Hayamin for the Bias Girl Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.